How are we, people? This is chapter 11. My dad's life story continues. So, we are at the center or the midpoint of the story that so far is a 10-part series. We've done 10 chapters already, right from the beginning, when my dad comes to this world, when he's born, my grandmama, growing up in the Church Missionary Society, my dad, and pretty much making his way right up to Mango Senior Secondary School, and then of course getting a very coveted scholarship to Bukalasa Agricultural Institute or Agricultural College, and then working his way to his first job, Chief Principal Financial Auditor, Mango Growers Union. And then that is in the late 60s, 69. Because he was class of 65, Mango Senior School. He finishes by 69 and then enters the Cooperative Union. And then in the 70s, we've seen he gets married, he has a whirlwind romance with the Miss Uganda finalist. That would cast a very big shadow on his later life as the other woman in his life. Because when my dad fell in love with my mom, it was more of a coincidence, because as you are aware, there were a bit of some explosive revelations that earlier on my dad had a relationship, call it so, with my mom's elder sister. Kati kyentegeezako bagamba nti my dad was known to the elder sister of my mom, and they moved into one of the houses he was building in Cheba, and then later on, things as they are. But to me, what really pressured my dad, when he went on that conference in Nairobi, like a getaway, they went together with my mom. My dad is 23, 24. Very, very, very successful at that time. So they go with my mom. That is in 1971. So 3 months later, yes, because the conference was in October, September time. So by December that year, 71, my mom finds out that she's pregnant. So 6 months later, preparations are in motion. The wedding takes place in April. I'm born in June. Are we together? So let's get that into our thinking, that whatever events were happening at that time, my dad was making very constructive decisions, because he got married. It wasn't just like, a Tom, whatever, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Tuyingira 1970s. So when Idi Amin is overthrown, when Idi Amin overthrows Obote. Yeah, that's correct, me people there. That is 1971. By the end of the year 72, I'm born, and we have the economic war, the new rising elite. The people who shaped the Uganda today, post-independence, were the young elites of the 70s. They came of age in the 70s because the colonial government had set in line a template, which template Obote would use as a common man's charter. Ebintu byonna ebiri e Uganda essaawa eno Kaabe Museveni nga yafuga biri ku template. Kebibeere parish model, kebibeere kibinana biri ku template eyo. template. It's like a script. It's like a script. So the young elites were in a dilemma. Once Idi Amin wages an economic war. What was the economic war about? It was about dismantling the structures that were in place, which meant that pre-independence, the Africans were designated certain sectors, certain areas, certain roles. So they were... Okay, let's continue. This is still chapter 11. There was an interruption there in the middle. So what I was saying that there was the need to dismantle the structures as they were. Ekintu kino kakati, it was a very, very tempting situation for those who knew what was going on and what was going to be happening. Hence, the decision by the likes of my dad. My dad gave up his job. He had hardly worked 2-3 years to go into private business. And with the change of the government, kakati mtata wange, my dad nga aine emikwano gy'amaanyi nnyo mu government vis-a-vis the fact that also he had the Mengo connection plus the Mengo Boys Club. Nga they wanted my dad on the table. Nti Kyanda tukwetaaga g'omusajja ategeera ebyaki eby'essente. My dad was very, very, very savvy with money. Kakati, but it was a very tough one. Mu mikwano gy'alina mu gavumenti mwe muli the likes of Henry Chemba, mwe muli the likes of Abu Mayanja. Era bali bonna ne Kabaka mu 60s, my dad ne Abu Mayanja yawandika constitution yaffe ye Uganda. If you don't know that, yeah, he was a very, very intelligent man. He was a lawyer. Mwe muli ba Jole George Wanuka, mwe muli ba Bidandi Sali, amanya manji. There are lots of names there, people. So in the middle of all that, agenda kuyingira private business, which would later morph into an industrialist. Mind baita shock doctrine or shock and awe. Kakati, this was it. Mu template ya Common Man's Charter, mwe muli bi project binna bagamba ebya grandioso, twainanga things like Uganda Crazy, Uganda Bati, Uganda this, Uganda that. Everything was Uganda this. But it came at crossroads with the East African community, then which kind of was swallowing up everything. Wakati East African community kyayitandise mu 1960. It was formed in 1967. Kyalimu Obote, kyalimu Nyerere, kyalimu nani n'owe Kenya Jomo Kenyatta. Mwe mwali East African Airways, East African Ports and Harbors, East African this, East African hotels, East African. So what they had as a federation was based more on economic structures until we could do things, East African Railways, East African Airways, everything East Africa. But we had the conundrum of what we thought was Ugandan. Mundaba, Kati, there was money to be made if one positioned him or herself. Chilaba, mu cooperative alliance, church chikwata economy ngati chijigatira wamu. Kati my dad having been in the Growers Union, do you know what the Growers Union was handling? Mwalimu agriculture, mwalimu emwanyi, mwalimu ebyuma ebisusula emwanyi, mwalimu ebintu bingi nnyo. To the fact that if you knew the innings and outings, the comings and going, wali olaba sente weziyita, sente oba oziraba nga zitambula, bategeera sente. Kati I think my dad had positioned himself nti he could invest or buy shares. Kati bano abakifunamu, kati kamboya example, my dad was behind the scenes. Kyenabagamba era mu chapter emu nti bw'ayingira KCC, KCC is a Kampala City Council, what you call Kampala City Council Authority today. Be basooka okukwata zitenda za kasasiro, cleaning of the city. On the lucrative side was the collection of rubbish, the trucks. Muchimanyi nti no, at that time ne ba importing a Mercedes Benz trucks nga ze zisomba ebisaaniiko, mwabirabako ebitata. So that's one typical example I can give you. Kati najja nga ali mu kino, ali mu kiri, ali mu kino, East African General Insurance, Jim House, then later on you have state. Kakati abali mu East African General Insurance, just example, be badda mu statewide insurance, then also National Insurance Corporation. Nozamula bikintu bwe kyali kijja kishiftinga. Coffee Marketing Board under the auspice of Roger Mukasa, naye yali mukwano gwa muzeeyi wange. In fact baali bonna Mengo mu 70s ne ba forminga, because they were removing things and centralizing them. Kwekola Coffee Marketing Board yaliwo before, naye it was positioned as a government entity, because remember the unions were so powerful until at some point the government was like on the peripheral. Munfuna bulungi nnyo, government ng'eraba nti ekintu tekiriimu oba tekifunamu. So to put things in line, Coffee Marketing Board was formed, but with the premise of the cooperatives. Okay, Kamboya example. Bugisu Growers Union. Yali very huge. Arabic coffee na bitabite. Nenge mwanyi zawe ate bwe ziva gye zivudde ate nazijja bugoloobi ne ziyita mu Coffee Marketing Board, government esobole okuzicontrollinga. So things were being dismantled. Kyembagamba nti kakati muzeeyi wange wagaggawalira excessively nti they knew baali bamanyi waawa sava, they knew where to position themselves. Kiraba, then this is going to create another problem during the 70s. Idi Amin wages another on mafuta mingi people, bana baali bagaggawalidde mu kintu. We had the coffee boom and we had other things that were going on. Kakati Amin naye ngaali suspicious nti bayinza omujjako anytime. Ekyo kyo yali akimanyi. He was in power but very very suspicious that he might be what? Overthrown. Tuli together. Era tugoberera emboozi na bulungi nnyo. Ntegere ekyayi kigenda mu maaso n'ekyaliwo. Kati nga baminisita abaali mu gavumenti ey'Amini, it was a very 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 fragile time. Naye of course we baliira wabeeranga we baliira. Okiraba nti mukwano gwa muzeeyi wange Henry Chemba bw'ajja London wano awandiika akatabo ka State of Blood, yajja ne ssente empitirivu nnyo nga he was the Minister of Health. Kiraba mukitegeera kye bagamba. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty, but you can understand nti this then becomes what they call patronage. Nti government ebeerako if the ruling government katugambe tebyaleero katugambe NRM abantu abagirimu abagifunamu tebagifunamu nti bagifunamu batya, it is a patronage system nti ekintu kijja ne bakiyisa mu bantu bo ne bakifunamu. Kati minisita tajja kubba tino sente azikutte ez'eddwaliro azirye, no ajja kuteekawo contract ate agiwe kegusi yaji, do you get me what I mean? You know what I mean? Mufuna bulungi nnyo. Kati ebintu ebyo byanyizanga Amin n'agamba nti mafuta mengi, there is a battle against. Naye kati kiri bwe kiti, kyali bwe kiti. Let me explain that to you very clearly. Once you have the elite nga bamaze okugaggawala baba bagala kuprotectinga bya bugagga byabwe, kyali kyangu nnyo for them to begin a war against what? Idi Amin. Kubanga era be baali bamuleese Idi Amin, be baamulaga ekyokukola. Okiraba bino bagamba nti no sijui yajjako Obote yajjako, bali bayita bakati the elite had seen a weakness in the system. Kyova yatandika okutta abantu ne bagamba nti no, because you have to contain the threat. However, the threat went back to Obote. Obote agenda ogifunamu nti kakati they labeled Uganda in a certain way. Nti Idi Amin yatta abantu, Idi akola those kind of things. So ekintu kibeerawo naye ate to the advantage of those who want to come in. Kiraba mufuna bulungi nnyo. Kakati like an example, growing up tetwalya kawunga. I had never eaten kawunga in my life. Nakula kawunga tugenda ne ku dduuka n'ogamba nti bampe kilo 2 emmere ya kawunga, sijui emmere y'embwa, dogs food, posho battanga nte ne bagamba bagenda kutta ey'ennyama ya mbwa. We had about 50 dogs nga ziri ente namba buli wiiki, batta nte kulya nnyama. Guys, mutegeera bulungi nnyo. Kati abatategeeranga kintu ekyo tebamanyanga kikigenda mu maaso. We had a very big farm. That's one of the first things my dad did. Yagula Kakiri mixed farm. It was a model farm. Kakiri. Kuliko ente, kuliko buchayi. It was a very, very nice farm. Very, very nice farm. 70s. Mufuna bulungi nnyo. Kakati ebintu bitandika okukyuka within inside Bamuseveni Orobo bayingidde Tanzania, be positioninze, and then by 79 it was just a clock ticking away. Okay, I mean yagwa mukatiba. That was a booby trap. Bino ebya okulwana utalo ne Tanzania emutukula whatever. No. There had been a lot going on. Kakati awenzukiranga bayageranga nnyo ku Uncle Paulo Mwanga yakomawo. He had been an ambassador to Paris. Na akomawo ne yeegatta ku Obote. Prior to going into his foreign policy job, whatever, ambassadorial, yali akola mugundi mu post office. That would give me the assumption that he had some clues on intelligence. Okuba nti yalina connections ezo ezimukomyawo n'ayingira ekintu kino ekyali kigenda maaso Tanzania, kikosi Mungu whatever kikosi balina ebintu byali bigenda maaso beegatta, the Binaisas, the Lules, munfuna bulungi nnyo. Oyito joke era asomedde wano Sandhurst, bonna bali Tito Kero Museveni. That later led to the formation of the Military Commission in 1980. Ng'amaze okuggyako Idi Amin. Kiraba kubanga olutalo olwajjako Idi Amin, let me tell you this, abajjako Idi Amin bafinansiya abakirimu be baali bayanga billionaires, the young elite. Bo baategeera omuzannyo nga bwe gwali era I would call that betrayal. Kubanga nyini bw'otumya military commission eyo, it was an outfit of what was previously there. Kiraba kubanga mu 70s he features widely. Tito Okello he features widely on both sides of Idi Amin and Obote. Boyito Joe kani yali abatutte okusoma Sandhurst. Who took them? Mufuna bulungi nnyo. The Uganda National Liberation Force over the Uganda Army. Twalina amagye ga mirundi ebiri during the Amin's regime, because from what I'm gathering, amagye ga Amin gaali highly trained. Nti olutalo olumuggyako lwali terudeservinga level of militarization he had. It was like a setup. Kiike kyayiika kitya? Kyayiika na foreign force, abakombozi abaava e Tanzania emutukula we baayingirira ne bajja paka Kampala ne bajjako. I would call it annexing. They annexed the power structures. Kubanga announcing anti no Idi Amin yagenze yali oyito joke. Lwaki bamukwasa emmwanyi? Mukitegeera bulungi nnyo mu 1981. Why was Oito Joke given a parastatal to head by Obote? Kati, if you stretch this thing far and wide, kyembagamba nti kakati nze nga muzeeyi wange, he was positioned behind the scenes. Munfuna bulungi nnyo kati ono ye politics 311, the unseen or the untold workings behind the scenes. Kiraba kubanga nze neewunya nnyo ebintu bingi nnyo bitwalingamu. We were privy and privileged. My mom used to fly every week to Kenya. To fly agenda asome. Kololo airstrip. Kiraba mbaweeyo ekirala. Uganda Football Federation. Tiimu zonna ezaazanyanga mupiira ogwo zaalinga parastatals, meaning that state parastatals government mwe allocatingiranga sente ne zitambulira muki mu bantu abaali bakifunamu. Uganda Commercial Bank Football Club, Nyanza Nightil Football Club, that's Nyanza Textile, Uganda Batteries eyo later on gundi mulwana. Behind the scenes there were people behind the scenes. Kati sisobola babulya nyingi nnyo ebintu muzeeyi wange byeyalimu nga shareholder, but the one I vividly can tell you was the Lake Victoria Bottling Company. Bagitandika kubanga Coca-Cola yaliwo oba mu 70s 60s. Pepsi Cola najja luvannyuma nnyo. Pepsi kakati eyo bottling company yayiranga soda omulala gwe yakolanga Because how these beverages, Pepsi and Coca-Cola, they give you license and all that kind of things, and they kind of give you a product, whatever. But you had to have a bottling whatever infrastructure. Kati yali Lake Victoria. Kati muyo nga mulimu subsidiary gye bayita Crown Cox nga yamuzeeyi wange. Kakati taloni ye becoming Crown Beverages yatunda shares Pepsi Cola, Uganda Batteries, Uganda Bati, bintu bingi nnyo kiraba. So in terms of the 70s, what we are saying now is a power play and interplay behind the scenes. The young elite are in the forefront of things to dismantle the structures that were there pre-independence, post-independence, and begin a new Uganda. Kakati, that could not sit well after the elections. Obote seemed to be an outfit of the old guard. Ekintu kitandika slipping away from your hands. And this is what was happening in that case. Museveni found it very easy to start a guerrilla war on the pretext that the elections had been what? Fraudulent. Era Obote nyini yavaayo n'ayogera neyeebuuza nti Museveni twamuwa obwa defense, Museveni twamuwa kino, baali ng'abaali bagabana ki ekimutwala alwane. Kiraba? To me, I would look at that as a conspiracy of things. They hadn't sat comfortably around each other. Take a start. Like obvious, the politics of the day is becoming tribalistic. Ekintu kyali kigenda kusigala ngulu no mu north. Ne ate kakati bwe tuddayo mu argument. Timanyi nti no, this was by design. Mukimanyi nti kyali designed. Lwaki later on years later tulina Southern Sudan? Lwaki years later abantu ab'engulu awo bonna beebamu ffe twawulyanga banobbi, tujuye abacope, abakakwa, naye nga bonna beebamu. Ne tusoma the Sudanese soldiers, Captain Frederick Lugard, nti yajja n'aba Sudanese whatever militia ne balwana entalo e Bunyoro ne banyora. No. So they were used as a mercenary force, and then they would shape the history of Uganda, and that would now begin to play out in the army. Even to overthrow Idi Amin, it had to be an opposing force from outside. Kiraba? Mufuna bulungi nnyo. So, how these forces were playing. So with all these things that are happening in the 70s, we find out that Museveni was learning a lot. And he was young. Yali mwana muto. Era olina abuuza n'okubuuza nti how did he manage to sit around, the old guard? Abatitokero baali basajja bakulu. I would guess baali mu 60s. Yeah, they were up there. Museveni ng'ali mu late 30s. Yeah. Kakati, that's how I would put that together, because coming to the dawn of the 80s, which we are going to start now, henceforth, from 11, 12, 13, 14 onwards, we're going to be doing tuyite mu lutalo olwa 1981 to 85. Olutalo lwaggwa mu 85. The guerrilla war. After the peace talks, gwe mupiira gwe nabagamba, the billionaire syndicate KCC versus Express. The country at that time was on tenterhooks. Peace talks zaali zigenda maaso back to back. Kampala is divided. Technically, I think the whole country was divided. Kubanga nzijukira sijui ku lw'e Masaka mu Lwera nga tosala, Ejjinja Mabira nga tosala, Kampala sijui Kansa nga tosala, half London tosala. Everything was sliced up. Everything was sliced up. Naye tugenda kuddayoko ne mu 70s. So what we are learning, nti those who got rich during the coffee boom can be explained by the rise of the mafuta mingi, abavuganga Benz bonna abagagga bamuzeeyi baffe. Nze mama wange yavuga Benz nga alina emyaka 17, 18, 18 years, 17 year old avuga Benz. Enyumba compound eva kuno n'eri, tuggulawo compound abantu ne bayitawo nga batunula mu nyumba yaffe balabe ekiriyo. 3 houses in the neighborhood. That's when we moved into Kyebando in the 70s. 71 Idi Amin yakajjako Obote. And that is about the same time my dad was building those houses and retiring mu Mango Growers Union. So everything begins to happen so fast. Until by the time my dad lost a few friends during that time. Katinga Jole Joe Kiwanuka yali mukwano gwa mzee wange. Founding member of Express. Jole Joe. Express has a direct connection with Uncle Patrick Kiwanuka. My dad's childhood friend. Chiraba. So things were beginning to unravel. Things were beginning to take and not a nasty, because ngiranga bwe nabagambye nti Idi Amin yali ali suspicious of everything that was happening. Kati bani abaleeta Idi Amin? Idi Amin nti nga we nabagamba Obote yali ku conference naye kiri bwe kiti. It is told nti issue mu magye mwalimu ebyali bigenda mu maaso, ate kino ekya common man's charter. So Idi Amin yakigwa mbugwi. It is the same thing that happens in 1979 nga bamujjako. Oito Joko seemed to have a bigger say behind the veneer of Uncle Paul Mwanga. Bang yali chairman. Then they make the sham elections, the military commission, and you're announcing a result says Uncle Mwanga yanzijuka ne party yo bakola party wa Fawaka. There was a very big party at our home. Nenga ze chene bagamba chene unya nti my dad was not party affiliated. Sara bako ku kintu kya UPC waka. From my memories, what I remember is the churches, the bishops bajanganya ka Dunstan Nsubuga Misairi Kauma Kiga, whenever. I've got the names and the pictures of them people. Negu Njoyo, what's his name? Lumu, Jonan Lumu, bishop. Was he a bishop? I think it was a bishop, yeah. Oyogwebatta. Yeah, yali mukwano gwa muzee wange. And that would explain one thing. Mu 1972, the wedding of the year. Mukimanyi nti my dad had Namirembe Cathedral extension wano ku Madaala done up. During that process, they closed Namirembe and all the services were being held at All Saints to Vewao. Then you had the creation of Kampala Archdiocese. Before it was Namirembe. Mukiraba kati atandika okuzimba ekkanisa y'e Kyebando nga Kyebando eri part of Kazo. Then they formed another parish. Church zombi ebbiri ezo, St. Paul's Church Kyebando, St. Peter's Church Kalitunsi Kyebando ziriko sente za muzee wange. Ate tulinavaayo eyo naye kitagobwa gyazaalibwa. So I think my dad attached himself to his background growing up within the church missionary society. Kubanga ezo sente ziyateekanga mu bintu ebyo it wasn't small money nti just a token in the basket. It was big money. Yeah. Because he didn't have a sense of belonging. Yayitamanyi bingi nnyo bimukwatako, and I think he struggled with that. You know, you're not sure who your father is. You're not sure where you're coming from, and that is going to come in the chapters coming next, which I call the secret, the family secret that my dad wrote down in a handwritten will. Kuba yakula babyogeranga. Yakula babyogeranga bayogera nti sijui mwana mujja na nyina. You know, they label you this kind of funny names. So kakati byebyo bantu bange, we gotta do the next in the series. All right, there are more chapters are coming in the series. All right then, yeah.